Luke fell to his knees on his 5th birthday, blood soaking through his uniform as a girl in green stood behind him with a sword raised high above his fallen body. Several academy students surrounded Luke with weapons drawn, and steel pierced through him as memories of a game he once loved surged violently through his collapsing mind. Luke jolted awake in his childhood bed, realizing with growing horror that the villain destined to die in that story was actually himself all along. He recalled the game's hero was a young swordsman fated to become the legendary Sword Emperor while training at a prestigious academy for talented students. The story followed the hero falling in love and growing stronger alongside loyal companions before ultimately crushing an evil duke's family in their planned coup d'etat. Luke Hagato Dustos, the second son of that same doomed duke, carried a humiliating nickname earned through cowardice and cruelty within the original storyline. People mocked his disgusting appearance and rotten personality by calling him the gross fat toad, a tyrant who bullied the hero while hiding behind his family's power. His cruelty supposedly stemmed from his mother dying immediately after childbirth, leaving him neglected while his magical talent went completely undeveloped and ignored by everyone around him. The Duke used Luke merely as a disposable pawn, never even a true villain, existing solely to be killed off early without any real narrative purpose. Lying in bed as a child, Luke wondered in dread whether he was truly destined to become that same disgusting toad within another 10 years. Both he and the hero were supposed to be 15 when the game officially began, meaning he still had time before his fate was sealed. If he avoided every evil deed and refused to turn into the gross fat toad, he believed he might actually manage to change his future entirely. Clutching his blanket, Luke admitted he couldn't erase his family's evil reputation, but he could at least prepare to survive the coming purge against them. Remembering he supposedly had raw magical talent, Luke stared at his small hands, determined to test whether that power was actually real inside this body. Without any game interface guiding him, he wondered how magic could even function, then noticed a strange, airy, soul-like energy stirring faintly within his palms. Sitting up in bed, Luke whispered the word aloud, casting his first hesitant heal spell purely by treating the word itself like a chant. He couldn't measure any real result without a health bar, yet he quietly admitted his small body did feel slightly better afterward than before. Curious whether repeated casting might improve things further, Luke kept whispering heal again and again until his mana ran out and he lost consciousness entirely. The next morning, Serb gently asked if Luke Sama was awake and how he felt, though he privately wished he had someone qualified to teach him magic instead. Since his father would never bother hiring him a tutor, Syrup, the dog beast man, made agreed that self-study was truly his only remaining option left. Luke asked Syrup to teach him magic, though she offered a picture book instead until he pointed at a thick volume called Magic Fundamentals lying nearby. He begged her repeatedly with pleading eyes, admitting she was truly the only person he could rely on for reading, math, and everything else besides. Since dog beast men apparently enjoyed exercise, Syrup suggested combining lessons with training, but Luke firmly declined and simply let her continue teaching him. Instead, the Magic Fundamentals text proved difficult even for Syrup to read aloud. Yet Luke insisted she was doing wonderfully despite stumbling over unfamiliar attribute magic terms. Mana turned out to be transparent energy floating invisibly in the air, and its available amount depended entirely on each individual's natural inborn talent. Luke realized his earlier healing spell works simply because he imagined his mana flowing toward healing without ever needing any interface or activation command. Most nobles could only use basic attributeless magic, while attribute magic required special inherited talent that only certain bloodlines were fortunate enough to possess since the discussed family carried an especially excellent lineage. Luke wondered whether he too might eventually awaken some form of powerful attribute magic himself. Syrup gently held his hand while he slept, quietly promising to keep him safe, and 1 full year passed steadily by afterward. Training had been brutal at first, causing him to faint repeatedly, but exhausting his mana daily gradually increased his total storage capacity over time. After learning to read, Luke buried himself in books, searching for ways to escape his fate. Frustrated that the Annex offered no real magic tutor. Remembering his acne, warts, and obesity from the game version, Luke decided his first priority had to be improving his overall physical health. He insisted on washing gently since his skin was delicate, prompting Syrup to question why his soap produced such unusually thick, foamy bubbles. Startled to learn Luke worried about delicate skin, Syrup admitted she couldn't picture the ruined appearance he claimed awaited him in the future. Afterward, the two of them began a full skincare routine together twice daily, with Syrup promising to faithfully learn and follow his exact regimen. Luke used his practice time efficiently, casting spells while preparing bath water, dreaming of someday affording expensive high-class products without worrying over their cost. Syrup encouraged him warmly, promising his skin would turn completely smooth within a year. Though Luke admitted washing his body still felt unfamiliar, noticing how much healthier he looked, sees that he clearly had many things on his mind, especially concerning his diet and daily meals. Cooking for himself instead of eating unfamiliar previous world dishes seemed to suit his digestive system far better, improving his overall health almost immediately. Luke committed to sunlight early mornings and gentle exercise near the forest until Syrup finally declared he was well enough to go outside. Syrup suggested starting sword training again, but Luke immediately refused, admitting bluntly that he simply couldn't stand exercising in any form whatsoever when she asked whether he truly wanted an easygoing, healthy life above everything else. Luke confirmed that was exactly his honest goal. Syrup argued that eating and sleeping alone would eventually turn him into something terrible, though Luke worried living easygoing might prove genuinely difficult regardless. Luke felt he still had real potential and wanted to grow up handsome, finding it hard to imagine becoming that disgusting toad from before. He reasoned that visiting amusement parks or casinos daily would eventually stop feeling fun, since leisure stopped being leisure once it became routine. Being born noble gave him no real safety net, especially knowing his father would eventually sacrifice him without hesitation whenever it proved convenient. Since his privileged childhood meant avoiding hardships, Luke planned finding a wife to support him or securing stable income if marriage never happened. The game split neatly into two arcs, and skipping the academy entirely could dramatically change his fate. Since Luke mainly appeared there, the war arc resolved the villain's incident, while the academy arc focused on romance and training. Though he still had a reason to attend, remembering vivid scenes of monsters, allies, and magical creatures from the game world, Luke admitted quietly to himself that he genuinely loved them all. Determined to become a happy slacker, Luke vowed to enjoy this world fully. Though Syrup insisted swordsmanship was still necessary for real protection, Syrup revealed she already knew he avoided training. Yet, Luke reasoned he needed no swordsmanship at all as long as she stayed nearby. After saying goodnight, Luke admitted privately that refusing every exercise offer still required him to invent some new solution to remain healthy. He created an original attributeless spell called Val, a floating mana creature capable of working independently even while Luke slept peacefully. Attributeless magic divided into 5 major categories, and understanding those categories first was essential before anyone could truly understand how Val functioned. Nearly everyone could cast light for illumination and clean for laundry, 2 simple spells that explain why people rarely bothered bathing themselves. Strength magic temporarily enhanced physical attributes like power and defense, though its effectiveness depended entirely on one's original trained physical condition beforehand. Enchantment magic allowed smiths and enchanters to imbue weapons with special attributes, though Luke admitted having no idea how that actually worked. Support magic buffed or debuffed other people by covering them in mana with effectiveness, depending heavily on imagination and specific mental clarity. Restoration magic stimulated bodies precisely using mana, and thanks to previous medical knowledge, Luke found himself surprisingly skilled at understanding bones and muscles. Be functioned as a self-sufficient spell built entirely on transforming mana. The same core principle every attributeless magic school relied upon completely. Luke discovered giving Val simple orders worked easily, testing it by asking the floating creature to fetch water while he relaxed nearby. Having ordered Val earlier to envelop his body during sleep, he watched astonished as it exercised his limbs entirely on its own accord. Realizing unconscious exercise was effortless, Luke smiled with relief, thrilled that Val could now move independently and train his body without supervision. Despite waking with muscle aches the next day, everything still seemed to progress smoothly. Though hunger struck him early while surrounded by unfinished books, Syrup presented dessert, believing moderation without occasional indulgence was equally unhealthy. While Luke savored his treat, insisting this was merely a lazy, villainous noble's rightful life. 5 years had passed since Luke settled into his lazy routine, and now, at 11 years old, he spent his afternoons buried in books while Syrup, his maid, at 17, watched over him quietly in the library. Luke murmured to himself as he read, and Syrup grew visibly nervous nearby, clearly building up the courage to ask him something that had been bothering her for a while. Luke realized there was no real difference between carrying an ordinary object and carrying a person, though he decided against explaining the concept to Syrup since her grasp of magic was weak. Syrup asked eagerly if she could try floating like the object he had just demonstrated, and Luke simply invited her to ride along without directly answering her earlier confused question. Luke explained that he was channeling his own mana to properly support her weight, reassuring Syrup that there was no reason to be frightened as she lifted gently off the ground. Syrup admitted she had never felt anything as comfortable as floating through the air, and Luke responded warmly that he was glad his invented spell had pleased her so much. Syrup mentioned she found it confusing that she had only ever seen Luke reading or sleeping. Yet somehow, his body remained remarkably well-trained despite his lack of visible effort. Luke described how he first gathered his mana and solidified it into a compact ball, instructing Syrup to simply watch closely as he prepared to demonstrate something impressive to her. Over 5 years of quiet, diligent practice, Luke had deepened his understanding of magic, while his companion Spirit Val evolved alongside him into something far more capable than before. Luke suddenly unleashed a flurry of precise strikes that resembled genuine martial arts, leaving Syrup stunned and delighted as she watched him move with unexpected practiced intensity. Syrup questioned why Luke was suddenly exerting himself so fiercely when he always claimed to despise intense exercise. Yet, he continued his sharp, controlled combination without pausing to answer. Syrup praised his performance as amazing, noting that she had never seen anyone move like that. Not even professional martial artists trained for years in their craft. Luke revealed that he absorbed Val into his body and transferred memories directly from his brain, creating a new spell he had personally named Trace to recreate forgotten techniques. Val could recreate the movements of Luke's favorite martial arts masters and even blend in techniques pulled from his memories of fighting games and manga he once enjoyed. Though Luke admitted he wasn't consciously aware of his own movements during Trace, the training still strengthened his body and left him with useful, convenient muscle memory. Syrup called him a genius, though Luke brushed off the compliment, insisting he was simply someone who had struggled greatly to understand magic before finally grasping it. Syrup offered to prepare a change of clothes since he seemed tired from the workout. While Luke reflected that his vast prior knowledge still left him puzzled about magic, they discovered a hidden spring deep in the forest, and Syrup suggested taking a short bath there, prompting Luke to casually offer to join her at the water's edge. Syrup had faithfully maintained her swordsmanship training and sharpened her fierce reputation, while also following the beauty regimen Luke taught her, making her striking looks even more refined. Luke admitted that witnessing Syrup's softer, affectionate side felt like a special privilege since she reacted to hearing her own name like a devoted, endlessly loyal companion. Wishing to have his magic attribute officially determined, Luke asked Syrup to pass along the request to his father since a job now awaited him. In this world, The power a person was born with, known as attribute magic, carried the name the power determined by God. Revealing and managing every citizen's attribute belongs solely to the Ministry of Magic, a place where the kingdom's greatest sorcerers gathered in Alecidus. Since learning one's own attribute directly counted as a privilege reserved for nobility, Luke assumed someone from that elite group would eventually visit him, renowned even among noble houses for their especially excellent attributes. The Desustodos family gathered together as Luke eagerly awaited discovering his own. A visiting official carrying a cushion mistook Luke for a girl the next day, leaving him quietly, wondering just how feminine he truly appeared. Mos Glicko, chief of the Ministry of Magic's Attribute Bureau, introduced himself and respectfully addressed Syrup as though she were a young lady. Recalling his entire title after hearing it only once impressed Malsa greatly, who praised Syrup as a remarkably reliable servant of the household. Still unaware that Luke stood right before him, Malsa then asked where the actual young master of the Discus family could be found. Syrup corrected the confusion by properly introducing Luke Hugolo Disgustos. Right as Luke silently wondered whether he had just been unknowingly praised, bracing himself to defend Syrup against the church's doctrine of scorning anyone outside civil society, Luke watched Malsa greet her warmly instead of showing prejudice. A friendly handshake followed once Malsa introduced himself simply as Luke, and the shared name created an amusing coincidence between the two of them. Closing his eyes at Malsa's request, Luke exhaled nervously while waiting for the examination of his magic attribute to officially begin. Hearing Malsa announce his attributes as sleep and sloth, Luke's eyes widened, struck by how precisely those two words seemed to describe him rather than something entirely new appearing. Luke realized these attributes simply confirmed a truth he had somehow always carried within himself. According to Malsa, both attributes belong to a special category called rare magic, distinct from the more ordinary types most people possessed. Since rare magic was traditionally kept secret instead of publicly recorded, MSA suggested listing Luke's ability simply as magic influencing the human body, everyone. Musa explained naturally had certain spells they were suited for, and researching one's own attribute could sharpen those hidden abilities further. Learning that self-research remained the only true path to mastering magic, Luke grew curious about what suited him and promised to train diligently. Shock crossed Malsa's face the instant Luke mentioned appraisal magic, since no one outside the ministry was ever expected to know such a term. Assuming reincarnators simply knew about appraisal magic already, Luke questioned Malsa's shock, though the ministry official quickly deflected while requesting Syrup bring their guests some tea. MSA praised the delicious flavor of the homegrown herbal tea, insisting it cleared his head and could never be purchased anywhere else in the kingdom. Grateful for Luke's understanding, Malsa offered to share a few tea leaves while confirming he intended to keep their conversation about appraisal magic strictly secret. Learning that Malsa had a daughter roughly Luke's age who genuinely loved magic, Luke felt certain she would enjoy the same tea he was drinking. Curiosity finally got the better of Malsa, who blurted out a question about the extraordinary floating cushion before quickly apologizing for his sudden outburst. Under a quiet evening sky, Malsa expressed gratitude for the time shared right before Luke casually called out to ask him something important. Startled by the unexpected request, Malsa insisted Luke hardly needed a magic tutor at all. Questioning exactly what more there was left to learn, Luke clarified he merely wanted someone to answer letters whenever he had questions about the parts of magic still confusing him. Curious in return, Malsa wondered if he might occasionally ask Luke a few questions as well, prompting an eager, immediate response, confirming the arrangement. Though Malsa admitted he couldn't guarantee every answer, he happily agreed to correspond, sealing their new pen pal deal with mutual thanks. Growing far more knowledgeable through Malsa's guidance, Luke discovered his own inherent magic, learning that attributed spells followed strict rules unlike free-form attributeless magic. Fire's inherent spells progressed from a simple pilot light to a solidified fireball, and finally into a fire projectile called Fire Arrow. Luke's own attribute, sleep, carried 3 inherent spells whose effects shifted depending on injected mana and the target's natural resistance. Among those spells were Sleep Timer, which fixed an exact duration through touch, and Sleep Delete, which forcefully dispelled any existing sleep magic. Luke realized he could put unsuspecting people to sleep instantly, especially when paired with his second attribute, Sloth, to erase any resistance entirely. Wishing Fire Arrow had a sleeping equivalent capable of striking from a distance, Luke smiled, convinced both his attributes practically functioned like cheats. With countless spells left to experiment with, Luke imagined putting teachers to sleep just to skip class, admitting no amount of time would ever be enough. Each dawn, Luke let Val take command of his form, dedicating time to bodily training while he cleared his mind for magical research. After training, a servant offered him a meal. He acknowledged, prompting his spirit companion to consider preparing food. Thou Syrup excelled at all servant duties. Luke still cooked, relying on recollections from his past life. Her meals were edible, but lacked finesse. While she cooked, Luke washed up quietly, feeling his worries deepen with youth. Luke headed to the nearest bath source to wash up, but unfamiliar voices caught his attention. Meanwhile, a girl close to paired, convinced she was alone and near to death. He approached cautiously, surprised to find someone else, and questioned if she was merely lost. Learning his voice, the girl responded in surprise, realizing she wasn't alone. Startled, both stared at each other, frozen in awkward astonishment. Realized the girl might be a guest at one of his sister's tea parties, which he had fully forgotten about. He introduced personally, confirming she was part of his sibling, Iris's gathering. Despair, the girl swiftly announced her full title, Karen C. Caribbean, and her noble background. Luke found her amusing and complimented her wearing a grin. Curious, Karen looked up in awe and asked if he could wield affinity sorcery. He asked Karen to demonstrate her affinity sorcery, and she eagerly agreed, saying she loves sorcery without delay. She responded energetically and mistook him for a store clerk. From a pouch, she began pulling out various items, impressing Luke with its storage reserve. Realized the pouch might be enchanted and asked her to wait until he dressed. To his astonishment, her sorcery manifested through rapid, fierce preparing food. Karen offered a bowl of spiced moonrabbit soup, humbly noting it was formed with simple ingredients. Luke, intrigued by the aroma, questioned how affinity sorcery might affect flavor. One bite overwhelmed him. It was the most delicious dish he'd ever tasted, even surpassing his past life. A wave of power filled him momentarily, showing the soup gave magical buffs decided. He saw Karen as the perfect assist for his ideal life. With hopeful eyes, he asked if she'd make that soup for him every period once they were elder. Without delay, offer followed. He announced he'd gladly marry into her family. Surprised and blushing, she asked for confirmation, recognizing it was a real offer. Afterwards, he informed his parent, who lightly approved making an administrator. Soon after, a meeting was arranged with Count Caribbean, who warmly welcomed him. Count Caribbean welcomed him warmly, brushing off the father's absence from the meeting. While some might find the parent intimidating, he confessed he didn't care much about his absence sincerely. He offered personally as a future member of their household, asking for agreement. Wearing a grin, Count Caribbean gladly welcomed him into their household. Karen, shy yet flustered, blushed as her parent revealed her feelings first. Conversation turned serious when concerns were lifted about girls mocking Karen for her bearing. Iris, his elder sibling, came to thoughts known for favoring only beautiful girls and treating onlookers harshly. Still, her round cheeks seemed adorable to him, and being 12, she was still growing. Admittedly, her preparing food and aristocratic position were what really caught his attention, not her inner beauty. While amazed by their maritime background, he hesitated when imagining frequent sun exposure. Since Karen had no brothers, he'd inherit the household, but she dreamed of wielding her, preparing food to beginning a restaurant. Reassurance followed. He had Sun's safety ready and claimed he was tougher than he appeared. He imagined summoning Val to handle luggage aboard a ship, making him spare to sleep peacefully. With assurance Count Caribbean placed his trust in him, officially welcoming him into the household. A laugh echoed as the Count teased his quick excitement with a hearty grin. Karen nervously expressed her wish to become beautiful sufficient to stand beside him. He found her adorable already, but realized someone had informed her about his long-time self-care routines. Willing to aid, he warned he'd be a rigid teacher. While she announced her readiness to study, her query about turning beautiful was met with assured reassurance there was a simple way. Though he understood bearing wasn't her only aim, he already had a plan creating. Karen asked to call him by title, and he agreed. He then suggested they talk somewhere private. Before heading to his room, he instructed Syrup to ensure no one was spying. Not inside. He informed her his meal's method involved sorcery, surprising her wielding the affinity sleep and sloth. He explained it was a way to exercise while unconscious Val, a sorcery entity, would command her form through predefined motions during sleep. To demonstrate, he offered to wield the sorcery on himself first. While she confirmed Val's autonomy, he activated the sorcery, fixing a 1-minute timer for Val to perform a simple workout. After waking, she was fascinated by the graceful combat arts like motions, though he had no memory of exercising. The outcome spoke for themselves, making him amazed. Asked about her own experience, Karen confessed struggling, but was eager to try. Despite claiming she was strong, Karen agreed to beginning with a gentle workout to ease into the regimen. 1 hour later, she lay exhausted, stunned that such simple motions wore her out. While with healing magic, he suggested they build her stamina slowly with basics. Encouraged by his kindness, she pledged to give it her all. Practice kept with skincare classes, beginning his full grooming regimen. With care, she rinsed her face thoroughly and followed counsel to evade rough contact with her skin. Eager eyes lit up as makeup came next. Her interest and quick learning, making each lesson rewarding. Attention sparked further when nutrition entered the discussion. He explained how meals supported grooming from within, creating fresh, wholesome meals, starting with simple dishes like steamed chicken salad. Inspired by his concepts, she crafted numerous Japanese-style meals, making him both full and nostalgic. She worried about cuisine idleness, having formed too many dishes. But overeating wasn't an option either. A irradiant notion struck: she could donate leftovers to local orphanages while continuing her preparing food study. Motivated, she began readying even more meals, himself, delivering them to various orphanages every day. While she flourished, he grew frustrated, wishing to return to a lazier pace at home. Despite holding her, he confessed discomfort with the orphanage's poor conditions and cleanliness. Excited orphans welcomed her warmly, though the building remained filthy due to lack of sorcery users. SN girl pleaded for aid. Her younger sibling had fell and wouldn't wake up. Despite dislike for the local temple, he agreed to check on the boy personally. Inside a shabby room, he found the child with shallow breaths, likely suffering from pneumonia. Attentive and calm, he cast healing sorcery, imagining the child's respiring returning to normal. After healing the boy, he reassured the girl there was no expense it was spare. Mentioning his aristocratic position, he explained he needed no money and wielded it as magical training. Grateful and emotional, she maintained he deserved thanks for gaining a fresh healing ability. Noted her intelligence and capacity. Wishing her environment weren't so limiting, Syrup suggested wielding surplus household funds to assist the orphanage more straight. Luke handed over 50 gold to the orphanage director, insisting on improving cleanliness and education. He began viewing the orphanages as valuable practice grounds surrounded by sick and wounded orphans. Luke, a 14-year-old aristocratic, enjoyed a comfortable life. His fiancée Fia Karen cooked for him every day. This routine evenly matched his ideal of a tranquil. Thanks to Karen, he experienced many pleasant days, but those days were nearing their end. Karen was set to leave soon for the academy dorms, and Luke wished to make the most of their remaining time. When she didn't show up, Luke felt the motive for her delay and decided to go find her. While heading through the primary house, Luke unexpectedly encountered his elder sibling, Ta. Despite being taller now, Luke observed Ta kept to ignore him without worry. Choosing to brush it off, Luke shifted his attention back to finding Kin, convinced she'd be close. Soon after, he spotted her sitting gracefully among blooming flowers. Her transformation amazed everyone. Karen's successful meals had turned her into a widely admired grooming. Luke stumbled upon Iris, his elegant elder sibling, hosting a tea gathering with Karen. Curious, he asked to borrow Karen, but Iris teased him for interrupting her tea party. Without delay, Luke announced he was there to reclaim his fiancée Faye, who had been taken. Rumors said Iris could charm any man with just a glance. However, Luke remained unaffected, insisting Karen looked even more radiant and deserved his full attention. Luke calmly asked Iris if she'd had sufficient fun and reassured Karen that it wasn't her fault. Frustrated, he asked to be left alone with Karen, expressing his impatience about waiting until next year. Guarding the pressure rise, he found Karen's flustered look adorable. Amused by the attention, despite Iris's glare, he softly reminded her not to ruin her lovely face. With a gentle grin, Luke encouraged Iris to do her best at the academy, too. Karen politely excused herself as Luke reached out and suggested they leave combined. Guarding them, though, Iris confessed to herself that Luke was the only one whose grooming rivaled her own. Months passed, and with Karen gone to the academy, he returned to remaining indoors. An outing was announced, something odd for him, prompting astonishment from those around. Despite the chance of rain, he invited Syrup to sit with, and off they went by carriage, wrapped in a cloak to hide her features. Syrup skillfully drove the coach, while he quietly missed Karin's presence. Arrival was swift thanks to the respect commanded by their aristocratic position. Their destination was the Great Maddow Shop, a wide department store featured even in the story realm. Syrup was given freedom to shop as she pleased upon entering the store. They were warmly met by Morsky Maddow, the informed shop owner, who immediately recognized Luke. Welcomed into the store's VIP room and offered a comfortable seat. To keep things engaging, the shop owner introduced his child rather than handling everything personally. Akari Mado appeared with a radiant grin, proudly welcomed them as the merchant's child. She expressed courteous warmth to both guests, even Syrup, an uncommon gesture toward beast folk. Curious about their visit, she asked their needs while he quietly noted their good fortune. Akari eagerly agreed to support, cheerfully offering to show every recommended item. She began the presentation with a magical hair dryer, keeping the atmosphere lively and hot. Pleased with the haul, he ended up purchasing nearly everything she introduced. Remembering Syrup, he asked if she wanted anything, receiving a simple response, though she refused. Syrup quietly hoped he'd still astonishment her with a gift. Ari suggested a red choker, catching Syrup's eye immediately with its polished charm. She hesitated, but the gift was swiftly decided and purchased on her behalf. With sincerity, the box was handed over as a token of thanks for her continuous care. Reached by the gestures, Syrup agreed to try it on with a faint smile, the accessory healthy, perfectly simple, elegant, and deeply appreciated. With gentle pride, she asked how she looked, the choker highlighting her gentle white hair. A shared grin followed. Watching her happy brought a calm warmth to his heart. Akari, pleased with the period, offered parting words and welcomed future visits. He reflected momentarily, recognizing that occasional outings like this held their own charm. Knowing he'd attend the academy next year, he decided to explore more before then. Before making home, he decided to confront the cause behind his later self's collapse. An unhealthy, defeated figure he was determined not to become. Though reluctant, he acknowledged the reason for alter. Even laziness, he realized, demanded work to guard. Luke's bearing had changed drastically, lifting deep suspicions. Once neat and graceful, he now stood unrecognizable before the mere medical theories failed. His body rejected nothing. Yet the transformation continued. He reconsidered the food and how it was prepared, linking it to his condition. Consulting Kin, he uncovered the truth. The ingredients contained toxins, altering his body from within. Suspicion deepened as Luke decided the strange transformation was worth investigating. Memories surfaced. His early years showed no major signs of abnormality. Everything changed after his 4th birthday, when he abruptly fell and remained frail for a year. Digging further, he learned the household chef had been dismissed, replaced by the steward. Realization struck. Those meals must have been laced intentionally. The steward had been poisoning him all along. Luke entered the room, finding the steward bound and waiting. He spoke calmly, questioning how things had gone so wrong in his youth. Reflecting on his deteriorating condition, he noted how his body always rejected the meals. Then came the accusation his decline was no accident, but the result of poison. The steward depaired, showing he had acted under orders from Luke's own father. Luke revealed he had long neutralized the poison with healing magic. Unnoticed by all facing the steward, he confirmed the betrayal with a one-piercing query. The steward confessed immediately, begging for forgiveness without resistance. Unamazed by the lack of defiance, offered forgiveness, but not without consequence. Instead of death, he sentenced the steward to become a subject for his sorcery experiments. Luke cast his sorcery, bestowing the steward with an eternal royal of sloth. Observing the influences, he realized what such sorcery did when wielded on an individual. Despite the punishment, the steward remained bound to his duties under a dull will. Shifted his attention toward the true mastermind, Duke Dustos, to evade direct conflict. He chose to incapacitate rather than openly difficult his parent. Rather than destroy his enemies, he decided to leave them powerless but alive back home. He downplayed his outing when asked by Syrup. With a playful tone, he teased her about entering the academy. After all, though danger desired, remaining with her had formed him hesitate. Ultimately, moving onward became needed not for glory, but to safeguard his tranquil, idle way of life. Working from the shadows, he aimed to shift the energy balance and bring down Duke de Sustodos. Despite the difficulty of his reincarnated role, a deep affection for the story realm kept him grounded. With resolve, he committed to playing Luke's part without falling victim to destiny. A year passed, and the Royal Academy entrance exam desired his arrival to join. He would reason to clear challenges in sorcery, battle, and knowledge. Scholarship chances tempted many, but he avoided drawing attention to personally interest sparked when a Beastmen participant appeared among the examinees. Recognition dawned. The figure readying to battle wasn't just any candidate. Emerald eyes and green hair revealed her position. Adventurer Ruby, one of the heroines. She launched a swift, decisive attack, overwhelming her opponent with remarkable pace and accuracy. Ruby's ferocious strike landed direct, sending surprise through the group. Just as the eagerness peaked, Luke was unexpectedly called to the stage. Showing little attention, he responded to the examiner while holding his familiar slime. Unleashing mighty elementless sorcery, he effortlessly overwhelmed his opponent, forcing a surrender. His performance left spectators stunned, prompting the proctor to end the bout and call for the next challenger. Ruby vanished after the exam, making him puzzled but unsurprised. Assurance remained firm the next period, knowing the games Luke always passed. Soon after, the Academy's agreement letter confirmed his expectations. With entrance secured, a fresh phase began navigating love and strategy while surviving the elite Academy's difficult social and political landscape. Luke admired personally, confidently, fully aware of his own charm and grace. After dressing in his school uniform, he prepared to leave. Acknowledging his maid's aid, he arrived at Owlus Royal Academy, the most prestigious school in the kingdom. The academy recently opened its gates to talented commoners, mixing social classes due to frequent monster strikes. Pupils were demanded to expert battle, magic, and study. The academy doubles as a study center known for advancing magical studies through legendary instructors. Its story-like structure centers around stat building and love paths influenced by player choices decided to endure. Luke intends to support the protagonist while avoiding his own scripted death. He remembers his past self and clings to his current form as a younger chance. With everything prepared by Syrup, Luke calmly reassures her despite her visible worry. Syrup tearfully expressed her frustration at being unable to accompany Luke due to academy rules. Though he appreciated her loyalty, Luke softly reminded her that their youth gap formed it impossible. He confessed lacking any attendant his youth, different from most aristocratic children at the academy. Still, Syrup worried about the capability of the gave attendant. Luke reassured her, wearing a grin, confident in his own independence and Karen's presence. Syrup expressed her heartfelt wish to stay by his side and resume tending for him. Thanks filled his voice as he remembered her unwavering presence since his soon childhood. No affection ever came from his household, yet her warmth filled that void fully. Every task had quietly fallen to her, making her both his power and his home. A gentle embrace, he pledged one period to repay the one individual he calls household. With a calm plea, he asked her to trust him and wait until they could reunite. Tears welled as they exchanged heartfelt goodbyes, both reluctant to let go. Before making, he asked her to watch over the home and pledged to return momentarily by year's end. As the carriage departed, his ideas lingered on Syrup, vowing to value her more. One period after graduation, he hoped to take her with him, never wanting to be apart again. Wearing a grin, he promised never to leave her side, and she agreed under one condition. Inside the carriage, he proposed creating a real household, making her surprise, blushing with pleasure. She acknowledged, declaring her love without delay. Upon arrival, he stepped into the academy, ready to start a fresh chapter in life. The bustling academy streets desired as his path finally began in earnest. Near the reception, he encountered a girl who met him formally and left a keen impression. She introduced herself as Labra Glicko, child of Baron Glicko from the Bureau of Sorcery, recognizing her connection to someone he trusted. His guard dropped during their walk. Passion for sorcery lit up her eyes as she shared her dream job at the Bureau. Instead of ridicule, she received genuine encouragement, something uncommon, but deeply appreciated. Encouraging words lifted Libra's spirits as he praised both her gift and dedication. Decided to grow closer, she revealed her fresh role as his academy attendant. Her obsession with sorcery became clear, earning her the title of sorcery maniac in the story. He tried to steer the discussion away from her intensity, focusing instead on structured academy chores. They chose a calm tea spot, the perfect fixing to dive further into their shared passion over tea. Libra asked to share her ideas on his unique sorcery. Eager and direct, her analysis dove into the essence of a tributeless sorcery, discussing its structure and operate in detail. Despite suggesting improvements, she praised its boundless capacity with impressive magical perception. He considered her a strong candidate for a study partner, much like her parent. As the primary event approached, they wrapped up their tea and headed out combined. Inside the great hall, pupils gathered as the academy's entrance ceremony began in full. While scanning the group, familiar faces emerged, some from recollections, onlookers from standing. A sudden pressure hit, as a surprising presence stirred a silent alarm in his instincts. Across the room, one student locked eyes with him, sensing something off in that moment. Their exchanged glances sparked worry, hinting at conflict before either uttered a one word. He felt recognition in the other student's eyes, though this should have been their first encounter. Luke observed a fierce look directed at him. Though unsure why, he felt pressure. The source was Dan, a knight apprentice. Their families belonged to rival factions, marking them as enemies by life. Beside Dan sat Linshin, aristocratic with the shield affinity, calm, poised, and influential. Choosing her meant following the hero's typical route, often ending in marriage and peace. Yet in another route, Luke captured her. She became his spouse and a sworn enemy. Linshin's unwavering devotion would ultimately lead to her collapse. Though her power in battle was undeniable, Dan lifted by a knightly parent conditioned since childhood and earned a place at the academy as her attendant. Fueled by his father's legacy and a deep grudge against the aristocratic faction. Meanwhile, Luke felt the pressure building, knowing Dan might soon turn his attention toward him. As Arena, the poised princess, addressed the pupils, Luke dismissed any attention. Though Arena was undeniably graceful, Luke remained indifferent, having cultivated up around grooming like Iris instead. He calmly stated his fiancée Fia A, and another he loved, quietly wary of growing attention. With her informal tone, he chose to nap through the event, believing in his companion to keep watch. Libria quietly let him sleep, her patience looking out even as onlookers watched. When it ended, she softly woke him. Luke rose, pillow in hand, unfazed by the empty hall. Luke remembered how he was once viewed hovering on a pillow, amusingly confirming it to be true. Later, he offered Libria a chance to ride it, impressing her with his informal kindness. Despite her eagerness, orientation duties frustrated her, showing her passion for sorcery. Without warning, he grabbed her hand, suggesting they gaze off combined. Blushing, she acknowledged. He teased her softly, offering to escort her like a gentleman. While they walked hand in hand, a keen glare from Lynchen followed, muttering, "Coward," under her exhale. Libera despaired at the accusation, insisting nothing was happening between them. Rather than reacting, he shrugged it off, saying frustration wasn't worth the power. He leaned in, adding he'd rather spend that power talking with her instead. Her looks softened, and she confessed how much she enjoyed their conversations, too. Orientation began with pupils choosing seats in a classroom labeled Class 0. Their instructor, Glorin Study, introduced personally as the one responsible for guiding them. Beside him stood Silas, the enigmatic assistant, known in legends as an immortal elf and feared sorcery user. Scholarship holder Frel emphasized that only power would define one's route at the academy. When asked about evaluation, Marshall lifted a keen query on how their power would be ranked. With dramatic flair, Glorin unveiled a fresh tool in creation called the Sorcery Watch. Pupils activated it by channeling mana, sparking reactions of astonishment as it flashed to life. The watch recorded each user's unique mana signature, offering real-time access to grades and ranks. Upon use, Luke's screen displayed his simple stats lol. No monsters defeated and Class 0 designation. Glorin explained that while everyone's mana was recorded, only the individual could view their full data. Ranks and class assignments were public, making each student's advancement visible to faculty. Arena held the top spot overall, while Ruby and Luke ranked 10th and younger, respectively. Labra claimed first in sorcery and Mural led in academics, earning Glorin's please nod. Meidel's lesson, Glorin praised magical tools with dramatic excitement, causing some to cringe, muttered about his strange behavior. Not recognizing the eccentric teacher was also the sorcery-obsessed maniac. She just judged. A sudden outburst disrupted class, making pupils startled as papers flew and pressure rose. Silas calmly redirected attention, announcing that pupils were spared to select their own subjects. Development depended on personal choices, and victory wasn't tied to grades alone. However, anyone with declining performance would face a harsh penalty demotion to a lower class. One exception stood out: victory in a prestigious tournament, the Blade Emperor Cup. Victory in the Blade Emperor Cup could save high-class position even with poor grades. Winners not only gain prestige, but also receive the title of Honorary Knight and a chance to difficulty the national champion. That honor elevated one's social looking, offering aristocratic privileges and influence. Ready pupils were encouraged to participate in training matches known as ranking fights. Details could be accessed through the watch, though simple rules were still explained aloud. Ranking battle rules enabled lower-ranked pupils to difficulty higher ones and claim their spot if victorious. Team and solo matches were permitted, though boundaries applied to participation and representation. These mechanics mirrored the game structure crafted to ensure Luke, soon overcome by Dan, to spark their rivalry. Frustrated, he realized the scripted conflict was closing in on him again. Dan eagerly lifted his hand, asking when fights could officially start. After receiving permission, a student stepped onward, eager to issue a difficulty. Without delay, he called out Luke's full title, declaring his intent to battle. The difficulty immediately registered on the Sorcery Watch, marking the match's official start. For Luke, it branded the beginning. His role as the tutorial antagonist had begun. Looking back to back as their position screens, performance, their powers, and ties to Duke Marshall. Recollections of the game's unique outcome weigh on Luke as he studies Dan's look. Sorcery practice starts in isolation. Yet another loss leaves him serving as Dan's knight apprentice. Meanwhile, Dan forms into academy life, creating bonds and gaining recognition. Faced with that future, Luke rejects the same mistake and chooses a different course. Inside the classroom, Luke sits calmly while Dan boasts about his rank and mocks him for avoiding a difficulty. Turning away, Luke says he refuses to battle someone who cannot understand something so simple. A female student abruptly intervenes, arguing that aristocratic should accept a suitable difficulty. She calls him troublesome and reminds him that his grades are respectable. Later, Luke clarifies he prefers helping from the background. Irina expresses her wish to see a match between Luke and Dan. Facing Luke straight, Irina reminds him that aristocratic should guide onlookers. Luke appears clear irritation. Yet, Irina insists it is his duty and declares she will not allow him to decline. She challenges whether academy position really affairs to him and reminds him of the teacher's words, recognizing he cannot reject a duke's child. Luke quietly laments his situation, finally accepts the princess's demand, admitting he lacks the power to oppose the game's flow alone. Though he complains about the conflict, Luke acknowledges he has no choice. As they walk toward the arena, Luke considers on his previous overcome and challenges how it occurred. He learns his opponent is a skilled knight apprentice of Duke Marshall. Despite that, Luke smiles calmly, convinced the match will be manageable. Liberia approaches Luke with interest, praising his odd sorcery and calling him strange. She explains her words are meant as admiration, not criticism. Luke responds calmly, explaining that aristocrats value pride and standing. Shocked by the thought, Liberia strongly denies ever feeling that way. Ahead of them, Dan and Irina move toward the arena with serious expressions. Attentive on the coming duel, the group comes at the vast arena where the long-desired match will soon start. Classmates gather eagerly in the arena stands as the instructor steps onward and questions. If both participants are ready, Dan loudly declares he will overcome Luke, accusing him of laziness during the entrance exam. Luke stays turned away without lifting his voice. Luke says that Dan should merely be grateful for the match. Luke calmly checks his position, recalling how levels raise by defeating monsters. When Luke discloses his level is 1, astonishment crosses across Dan's face. The instructor calls both pupils onward and formally announces Dan as the challenger. He responds lightly, showing little pressure as the ranking match is announced. At the signal to start, Luke thinks about how the battle once followed turn-based commands in the game. Sorcery collects in Luke's hand as he efforts to seize command of the flow. As Dan charges in confusion, Luke entrusts the next move to his sorcery and braces for the clash. A faint grin crosses his face while dark power collects behind him. Confusion grows across Luke's look when his sorcery reacts unexpectedly. Invisible power binds Dan's form and lifts him off the ground. His weapon falls, and Luke lightly releases him after confirming command. Recalling that Dan was never meant to be seriously injured, Luke decides to finish the duel swiftly. With a short enhancement and a sleep sorcery, Luke knocks Dan unconscious, ending the match decisively. Luke analyzes Dan's affinity sorcery, recognizing that it enhances both power and energy, but drains energy quickly. Pleased that he has done sufficient to save victory, Luke considers that losing would have suited a villain better. As the group watches, Luke weighs how to end the match cleanly with precise timing. He releases Dan's form and causes him crashing down. The instructor announces Luke as the winner. After confirming Dan is down, bringing the ranking match to a near. As Dan lies unconscious on the arena ground, Irina rushes onward in surprise. Kneeling beside Dan, Irina challenges the pride of the victor. Luke answers calmly, stating he never wished to battle and was forced into it. Turning toward the stands, Luke declares he will accept any ranking difficulty at once. Finding weariness, he sets a hand on his gaze and suggests he may already be exhausted. Luke addresses the silent arena, announcing he will share something crucial. When no one steps onward to difficulty him, he challenges the crowd's doubt. He says that he respects intelligence and those devoted to sorcery. Looking over the fallen Dan, Luke declares his contempt for those who rely only on brute power. The audience reacts in stunned silence as his warning forms over the arena. A student lies on the ground after a harsh attack, while whispers about his villainous behavior spread through the group. Outrage occupies his classmates as they vow consequences. Close two pupils ready to leave. Observing calmly, he considers on his own laziness and the precise timing of events. Intervention seems pointless given his opponent's stubborn pride and rigid sense of justice. Walking away, the pair feels believing in their choice, making the exhausted student behind weary but safe. Luke introduces personally asking to be called by his title, while Arena appears aside her royal title and asks familiarity. Walking side by side, they reflect on their brothers and the unique bond they share. Arena expresses respect for Luke, acknowledging the ability and work he displayed during the match. The two stand quietly as she departs, making Luke pondering her intentions and reassured that no resentment stays. Observing the heavens, Luke feels the day's events conclude smoothly. Luke steps outdoors, taking a moment to catch his exhale while observing the surroundings. Admires the meal she prepared, pleased that Luke enjoyed it after a long time. He expresses how much her preparing food lifts his spirits. Careful not to overpraise, Karen credits his instruction lightly, though Luke insists her own ability throws the victory of her projects. She reminds him that humility can hide accomplishments. While he acknowledges the assist of household and friends in achieving them, an informal discussion discloses assurance and family support, dismissing worries about wealth or status. Hands encounter and approval, recalling seasons of shared experiences and shared understanding. Feelings of affection and appreciation emerge rooted in seasons of care, attention, and shared moments. Asks to stay near show worry for separation, while reassurance highlights careful consideration of family obligations. Promises to stay combined are met with playful recognition, sealing the evening with trust, warmth, and affection. Flying throughout the evening sky, two companions enjoy a quiet moment. Soon, dawn discloses a lone figure outdoors, surprising a passer-by who wonders about his unusual activity. A performance of energy shows, making observers stunned and questioning whether a villainous plan is underway. Motions unfold gracefully, resembling a dance as onlookers marvel at the ability and accuracy demonstrated. Power beyond normal boundaries becomes evident, showing expertise and the power to overcome challenges that would overwhelm most. Observations reveal a carefree exterior, yet resolve and severely work lie beneath. Everyday practice and dedication in a rigid environment illustrate an unwavering pursuit of ability and mastery. Understanding emerges about the vastness of the realm and the challenges beyond familiar boundaries. Work alone feels insufficient, highlighting the reason to comprehend and apply learning alongside raw strength. Ambition grows intensely driven by the wish to surpass a remarkable opponent. Resolve burns brightly as a student vows to surpass a strong opponent. Distance and disparities seem overwhelming, yet work and persistence push him onward. Dawn habits bring calm with greetings exchanged in a calm moment before the period begins in the cafeteria. Counsel and care accompany breakfast, ensuring suitable preparation for the challenges ahead while acknowledging personal quirks and routines. Observations highlight development and power in onlookers, showing a mix of respect, admiration. Participation at the newcomer party allows observation of student interactions. Rumors of past achievements spread swiftly while regiment activities resume unnoticed by most. Different factions respond with mixed feelings, some showing respect, onlookers confusion or disdain, creating a difficult social dynamic. Tranquil moments allow attention on studies with previous threats, ensuring a degree of personal space. Choices regarding courses prompt careful consideration, juggling general education and elective subjects to ready for future challenges. Courses are selected freely, enabling priorities and personal interests to guide decisions rather than rigid requirements. Attention changes towards sorcery learning, emphasizing the pursuit of skills in line with the chosen path. Plans for the period are finalized, making classes complete and clear for the pupils involved. Private practice rooms provide calm spaces to training and develop abilities according to individual needs, with the top class gaining priority to choose from specialized resources and locations. Ranks are announced openly, designed to inspire competition among the pupils and foster motivation. The space for practice receives final adjustments, emphasizing scale and accuracy in preparation. Sorcery broadens the environment, briefly reshaping the room into a vast immersive space for practice. Returning the area to its unique size, pupils can now learning in peace while exploring fresh techniques. A sorcery circle is drawn precisely with emphasis on accuracy and uniformity to ensure suitable spellcasting and learning. A tribulus sorcery proves simple to wield, but requires creativity and practice to achieve true power. Attention grows as the depth and intricacies of sorcery become apparent, making it engaging and difficult. Preparation starts with documenting information, establishing a basis before diving into practical testing. Exploration focuses on bath sorcery, highlighting its versatility for insult. Defense hands-on training starts with expectation and eagerness, fueling the learning process and collaborative testing. A magical method is revealed, prompting astonishment and caution about its capacity influences on humans. Reassurance comes, clarifying that only a select few are aware of the power and its uses. A promise of silence is formed, ensuring the learning stays controlled and responsible. Interest arises as previously unseen powers like sleep and sloth are discussed and examined. Eagerness drifts for future testing, with anticipation and interest guiding the next steps in practice and observation. A magical watch cannot analyze unregistered sorcery, making certain powers undetected and unexplored. Capacity solutions involve wielding assessment functions and referencing administrator databases to understand unknown attributes. Challenges stay in miniaturizing the device and handling its limitations. First seasons were informed about their upcoming dungeon training, a demanded extracurricular trial. Some pupils like Luke found it a hassle. Team assignments began. Arena was chosen as leader of Team 1, creating a group without Luke and Linshin combined. Linshin became leader of Team 2, appearing assured while accepting her role. Libra requested to sit with Luke's team as his attendant, but was rejected to maintain team balance. Though disappointed, Libra acknowledged the choice. Luke reminded her to stay safe, warned Luke to stay cautious, concerned despite believing in his powers. Pupils moved into their teams, gathering in fresh rooms to start discussions. Linshin introduced herself confidently as Team 2's leader, while Muriel confessed her lack of battle skills. A cheerful adventurer pledged to be reliable in dungeon affairs and swiftly bonded with Luke. Another teammate eagerly offered aid, though her excitement left Luke quietly questioning her role. Ruby leaned in delighted, offering her gaze to be patted, surprising Luke with her forwardness. She encouraged him to do whatever he wanted, catching everyone off guard abruptly. Linshin yelled at them for getting sidetracked, frustrated by the lack of attention during their meeting. Pressure rose as she shifted blame toward Luke, who quietly recognized the situation had become a hassle. Calm returned when another member suggested a short break, prompting everyone to quietly sit and breathe. A lap pillow offer came unexpectedly, while Ruby agreed with an easygoing grin. Surprise spread across the leader's face, calling the scene impure as Luke rejected the notion. Attention returned after she maintained on final checks, though Luke still fought to stay alert. With power rising again, roles were explained. Linshin would charge ahead, while Ruby supported with pace and sorcery. Assist from the rear would be managed by another teammate, trusting in both healing and archery. Eyes half shut, Luke openly confessed he wanted to sleep, shocking the team leader. Rather than argue, a teammate calmly offered to carry him, watching no issue since they'd be in the rear. Frustration boiled over as Lin blamed their pampering for Luke's indifference. Approval came swiftly when the weekend dungeon difficulty was proposed, prompting an abrupt end to the meeting. Moments later, Luke reflected on their kindness, questioning whether their behavior was sincere or position-driven. Given the situation, Luke wondered if he had somehow become everyone's idol. Libra cheerfully met him, prompting another student to ask how well she had blended with her team. Without delay, she pulled him along, assuring everything was fine and cutting short further challenges. Uncertainty lingered in Luke's thoughts as he questioned whether past tensions had really faded. Their silent trade ended as both walked away, unsure if comprehension had been reached. Steps echoed as Luke confessed he never expected the protagonist's hostility to fade. Confusion lingered in his thoughts, unsure how to process the unfamiliar sense of ease. By the weekend, the group arrived at their cave location, a woods dungeon of low difficulty. Low rank didn't mean harmless. Many monsters were already cleared by pupils before them. Dungeons remained essential for collecting magical resources and powering tools. Muriel eagerly offered relief, asking if Luke wanted a drink or sleep, but he politely refused. While practicing archery, it finally clicked why she treated him so warmly all this time. A discussion days earlier revealed the motive: he had once healed her younger brother's illness. That memory tied to an orphanage stirred thanks she never forgot. Seeking permission from his fiancée Faye, she now aimed to repay that kindness straight. Grateful for past aid, Muriel cleared threats with ease, letting onlookers sleep. Ruby proudly returned with the sorcery stone, boasting that unmoving monsters formed her task simple. A scan revealed Luke had put the monsters to sleep, leading to frustration from Lin. Strategy wasn't the issue. Luke barely moved. While onlookers picked off sleeping enemies surrounded by slimes, Lin exploded in disbelief at the lack of real battle. Muriel stepped up confidently, offering to explain everything on Luke's behalf. She revealed that his sleep-like royal improved sorcery command while keeping monsters subdued. Because of that, nevertheless, Meowen, less skilled in battle, could train safely and improve. Eyes sparkled with respect as she emphasized how thoughtful and type Luke really was. Admiration was softly returned, making her flustered aside of her rarely shown. While reclining, Luke softly patted both girls' heads, triggering Ruby's loud demand for equal treatment. Lin expressed frustration, believing dungeon training should involve real teamwork and development, not simple outcomes. Her concerns were met with confusion. Wasn't clearing dungeons safely a good outcome? Efficiency formed sense. Resources were gathered, monsters eliminated, and no one got hurt. Protecting comrades mattered more than reckless fighting, and Luke calmly formed that point clear. Pressure flared as Luke questioned who was really being unreasonable, making Lin stunned and defensive. Silence fell before he suggested ending the session soon. Han calmly extended. Uncertainty crept in if the leader wasn't assured. Maybe continuing wasn't the right call. Gaze lowered. Lin apologized quietly, but Luke's voice stopped her retreat. With fresh resolve, she chose to keep going. Recognizing there was still time to grow, Ruby and Muriel fought fiercely while Luke easy-going close. Monsters peacefully hovering around him. As the mission wrapped up, sorcery stones were gathered and everyone prepared to return. Before making, Lin challenged Luke to a ranking match, decided to prove herself. Frustration surfaced as she predicted he'd limit her by banning sorcery, but Ruby swiftly stepped in. Keen warnings resurfaced. Rash fights risk lives and recklessness wasn't power, it was danger. Luke refused to battle, offering Ruby as a substitute if Lin wanted to prove herself. Lin hesitated but ultimately agreed, while Ruby acknowledged without worry. Despite having no motive to battle, Ruby recognized Lin's reason to express herself through battle. She issued the difficulty and Lin acknowledged. Luke quietly hoped it would resolve,